Good morning again. I mean, sticking to supply, Iran, of course, is one of a major supplier of oil, and of course has had its supply curtailed for many years due to various reasons. We've seen Iran and Saudi Arabia declaring overnight that they are resuming trade relations for the first time in a year, and they have been obviously having talks around the nuclear issue and around their relationship in the region. That's a new development in the last few months. Give us your take on why this is happening. What is in Iran and Saudi's interest to be making up?
Well, the Saudis have long wanted to have a stable relationship with Iran. They had a stable relationship with the Shah. They had some issues of competition. They had disagreement in oil markets and at OPEC meetings, but by and large, they were not hostile to each other. Since the Iranian Revolution, the government in Iran has changed profoundly, and it is now seen as they call themselves. It's a revolutionary government that is, in the Saudis' view, sowing discord. In the Iranian view, perhaps bringing a brighter future to people around the Middle East, but it's certainly not a stabilizing factor. So the Saudis, much like the war in Yemen, they would like it to stop. They have an ambitious domestic agenda, which they are trying to focus on, and these foreign policy distractions weaken that effort. I don't think that the talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran are going to amount to anything. I think that the Saudis are attempting to appear, and I think, and if there was a willingness on the part of the Iranians, they would make agreements. But I don't see anything significant coming out of that. I mean, but to be clear, what do I mean by that? I mean, do I think that they are going to stop funding the Houthis or Hezbollah or Hamas or the militias in Iraq? No, I don't think that's going to happen. Do I think they're going to stop working on their nuclear weapon that they've been building for 20 years and enduring harsh sanctions in order to maintain that program? No, I don't think anything that's going to change.
Well, what about the economic pressure that Iran is under? Its economy is in pretty dire straits. I mean, it's a healthy, wealthy economy, but it is under duress, and that is.
I think that economic sanctions are helpful, but I don't think they're decisive. I can't think of any situation in history where economic sanctions have really been the deciding factor. They can contribute, but I remember I forget. Well, it doesn't matter. It's trying to put sanctions on Russia is a good example. Okay, these are people that endured a 4-year siege of Leningrad, where people were starving in the street, and we're going to tell them they can't buy fresh vegetables today, so that they're going to change their policy. I don't think so. You talked a little bit about pricing for today, and I can chat on that for a minute, but perhaps you want to let somebody else talk now. I've talked for a while, but I do have some things I think you ought to pay attention to in terms of short.
Well, I mean, talking about pricing, do you think that the White House is right in pressing OPEC for more oil, obviously because of what's happening with prices? Do you think they're justified in doing that?
Well, I think that the OPEC is going to tell the White House to dial another number. I mean, this is a president who called the Saudis a pariah state, who says that he's not going to talk to the crown prince. You may have seen last week that the Secretary of Defense was supposed to go to Saudi Arabia. His trip was canceled, and meanwhile, the next day they met with the delegation from the Russian Parliament. I mean, that's a pretty strong signal. This whole idea that people keep trying to pretend that, OPEC doesn't matter. If I read another article that says OPEC doesn't matter, really, I don't know who writes these things.
Well, they matter, I guess, but at the moment, in the short term, crunch that we're seeing in the market, a lot of people are arguing that only Saudi Arabia has extra oil to offer, and so OPEC should be left alone for the time being.
Well, when I say OPEC, I mean Saudi Arabia. I should have. I mean, I view them as synonymous. Saudi Arabia, OPEC, whatever you want to. Yeah, OPEC. That's, you could argue that they may be meaningless, but the Saudis certainly are not. I mean, when Trump needed to save the domestic energy sector at the height of COVID and oil prices were going through the floor, who did he call to increase prices? He called the Saudis. And now Biden wants to lower prices, and who does he call? The Saudis. Okay. So, I think this idea that somehow that you can, just pretend that you don't like them for some, human rights abuse, I think is somewhat naive.
You have a little stake in shale oil in Texas, and I wanted to get an update from you where you see that going. We have had different opinions on the show on how likely shale may come back. It's making a comeback. It's at the US now is at 11.5 million barrels a day. Most people would agree it's not going anywhere near 13 ever again. But where do you see that? Is that going to play a big part in the market's outlook on next year's supply?
Well, it's good that you have Peter and I on the same show, because he's a trader and he deals with what's going to happen next week. I'm an economist and I have no idea what's going to happen next week, but I look at the long term. And the saying in Texas is that the cure for low prices is lower prices. And what's happening now is a long-term cyclical trend. Peter chatted about inflation. That's not a transitory event. We're seeing a cyclical change. The last 40 years have been a decline in inflation rates. And I think we are now going to see a long-term shift towards a higher inflation for a whole variety of reasons. The decoupling of supply chains, which people are now thinking is probably a good idea. The shift away from cheap labor in Asia, which will increase labor costs in the West and shift profit away from capital. These are long-term trends. And like what? And in the oil,
will that labor shortage today impact shale oil production in the next 6 months? I mean, the cost of inflation on labor.
Okay, you want to know about shale oil? Look, I said on this show 3 times. I think that shale oil will come back, and I think it will come back, and it is coming back. And I said it, and it is coming back. And people who say that it will never come back to 13, again, that just depends on the price. As I said, the cure for when there is no investment, you will soon see a shortage in supply. And we have seen a shortage of investment for a whole variety of reasons. One was low prices. 2 were the hedge funds, or not the hedge funds, the private equity funds didn't want to put money in, and private investors didn't. So we saw a reduction in drilling. Now we're seeing it. It's happening. And if oil goes to $100 a barrel, you'll definitely see more. The oil's there. It's just a question of what price you're willing to pay to get it out.
Just on that point, let's make the assumption that the US under Biden, succeeds in withdrawing, let's say, a bit more from the region, at least, on the ground. Will that not bring Iran and Saudi closer? I mean, I know you're quite negative on that, but what negative?
Well, no, I'm quite objective. I've been looking for the Iranian moderates for 20 years and I haven't found them. There are people who are still looking. I'm not one of them. Do I think the Saudis, as I said, would like? I think the Saudis are a status quo power. They have a lot to lose. They like peace and stability. They want to develop their own economy. If the Iranians would accept the status quo, if they would stop attempting to destabilize other parts of the Middle East, and quite aggressively. I mean, it's not like they're just talking about it.
Isn't that what the Iranians and Saudis presumably are talking about right now?
Yes, but the Saudis are if you talk to the Saudis, the Iranians are not willing to do anything. I mean, those talks haven't. look, those talks are window dressing, okay? I don't think you asked, I think that's, I'll just be very quick. And those talks are not going to achieve anything meaningful in my view.